Hey guys, it's Steven again with Silicone Crafts. So finally, we're going to do part 2 of the mold making tutorial that I started about a month ago. As I mentioned in a video, I'll put a link here for the video from the other day when I did a channel update. I talked a little bit about why there's been a delay. I've basically learned a lot more. I've had some trials and tribulations in my mold making, and so I wanted to make sure I really had it down pat before I made part 2, because part 2, of course, is the most important part where you pour the silicone and everything, so and actually make the mold. As we talked about last time, there were some important things that you need to have on hand before you make a mold. So first of all, you need your container. We talked about last time how I've used plastic containers. These are just cheap Tupperware containers I got for $2 at TJ Maxx. This is a mold I made for some floor tiles that are already put together, so I don't have to glue them into my 2-inch pieces that I use. Also, I've got little dishes like this where I can mold just little small things. And then I've also got some glass pieces. And then I've also started making, if you've looked at Bruce Hirst's instructions of how to make molds, he uses the Lego technique. So he builds his own hot box out of Legos and then a base of plexiglass or cardboard or whatever. And I've seen people make their own containers for pouring their molds into, literally out of cardboard boxes. And so I don't think it really matters what you use. I have noticed, and that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about in this video specifically, if your container doesn't have sides that are removable, so this container like this, it's very hard to get to demold the silicone, basically, because once you pour it in, it's going to be, even if you use some mold release, it's going to be a little stuck to the edges, and so you're having to reach down in and demold it, and it's already a little bit difficult on detailed pieces to demold it from the pieces, and so you're having to pull against the surface tension of the container. You've got a little bit of a vacuum going on there, and so it just makes it very, very difficult. And that's why I have switched over to from these containers to using something like this, where you build your own container, you build up the sides, and then those sides are removable when you go to demold. And so we remove the sides of the container, and then you're just trying to get off the pieces, not out of the actual container itself, because the container itself breaks down. And so what I have started using, I start out with a base of masonite, so just a plain sheet of masonite, so you can see that there. I use the slick side because it's easier to glue things to. It's also easier to tack down the clay that you use around to make sure there's no leaks, and then also easier to remove the Legos from. So a piece of anything really you can use, but I prefer masonite because I actually keep the master on here, and so I'll leave this piece just as it is so I can make this mold again later. And actually this is the mold that we're going to make today, but I'll show you the steps that I went through to make that piece. And so what you'll start out with is your base. It can be cardboard, masonite, MDF, whatever you want. Make sure you've cleaned it, make sure there's no dust on it, and then you'll start out with Legos. And these Legos are not that easy to find, I might point out, because I went to find some. I ended up actually buying some from my son's friend. Had him pick out a bunch of the blocks, the basic blocks, and then I just purchased those from him instead of ordering them on eBay. Because honestly, going on eBay is about the only way that you can order a box full of nothing but bricks, because they make so many different wheels and axles and men and handlebars and just all kinds of stuff that you'll just never use for this process, because you really just need the 2x whatever. You see I've got silicone all of these. The 2x pieces to build your container out of. So anyway, so I will show you. So basically you'll pick out an area where you want to put your pieces, and so let's say that we are going to mold some treasure chests. And so what you would do is you pick out an area that you want to use, and what I typically do is I will start gluing these on. So I'll glue treasure chests on here, and since we're using this material and not something like the glass or the plastic, then you can use regular super glue. So just regular Loctite cheap super glue. And this is the instant stick, so this is the professional liquid. They also have, if you prefer to have a little bit of time to move the pieces around, there's a gel that you can purchase. I prefer this because with the gel you have a chance of getting glue remnants around your piece, with this, it's just a liquid, and so whatever doesn't stick to the piece actually absorbs into the material, and so you don't get any residue there, so you're not molding the shape of the glue as well. So that's something I've run into over the last month or so trying to make molds, is that I get a little bit of excess around some of the pieces. I think I can show you that in this this mold. So I don't know if you'll be able to see that or not, but right there, there's a little just rough area around around that piece. So little extra pieces around there, and that's from the super glue being exposed. And so I actually molded the treasure chest plus the super glue that was there. And so you can wipe the extra away with a paper towel, whatever you'd like to do, but that's easier to do if you're using the liquid super glue. And so you pick out an area that you're going to use, and then what I do is I just start building a block. So if I know that I'm going to use the middle area of this, then I'll just go ahead and start building up my blocks. And so you'll build these up like this. And you want to make sure that you keep some structure going here. So you want to make sure that you overlap your joins here with a piece. So you may have to move it around to do that. And so then you just build that up. Just like that. So you'll build that up to whatever width and height that you need. So don't underestimate how much space you need. You want to make sure that you have at least probably, you can see in this mold here, you want to have a good amount of space, probably at least 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 inch around the sides. And so what I'll do is I'll actually build up my box, get the basic shape going here. And let's see. It takes a little bit of practice to get the blocks in the right area. So anyway, you get the idea. And so you build up a block. And then what I'll do is once you've got that a solid base built, then I actually take, before I glue these down, I'll actually draw an area out. And so kind of outline your box, and that way you know where to put your pieces. So, and you can see I did the same thing here. And so when I made this piece, I glued everything down, then I drew an area out so I knew where my pieces were going to go. And then what you do is you just take a little bit of super glue, and you'll want to line the bottom of this with just a little bit of super glue. You're not looking for complete coverage unless you want it to stay on. So like I want this piece, I'm going to make this mold over and over again because I sell the treasure chest a lot. And so I actually super glue these where they permanently stay. And so I put super glue all the way around the edges and in the middles. And so that way they're permanently on there for that bottom layer, but nothing up from there. So just the bottom layer. But all you really have to do is just put little drops in the corners of your pieces, and just in the corners. And so you'll want to put that back on your base once you put a little drop on there, and that's just enough to tack it down because you do want to remove that. So like I said, with this one I want to leave the bottom layer, so I glued it completely, but ideally you're probably not making the same mold over and over again, and so you just tack those down. And of course you want to have your base built a lot better than this, but I'm trying to not take up too much time. And so you put everything back together. That's just barely tacked down, so you can see it's just barely tacked down. If I really try, I can move it. And so you want to tack that down all the way around so that it's just going to stay there well enough for you to get the clay on. And so I'm going to speed up the video and get a proper box built here so I can show you. So once you've got your basic box built here, then you want to make sure that you've got your pieces glued in. One thing to remember about Hirst Arts pieces is that most of them are 1/2 inch high, so 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch high. A lot of the pieces are 1/2 inch, 1 inch, 1.5 inches long. So it's pretty easy to measure how much space you need inside your mold. You want to make sure that you have about 1/2 inch or so around your pieces, around the outside, 1/4 inch or so between all your pieces. If you're doing a lot of treasure chests, you can see that I have about 1/4 inch between each one of those treasure chests here. And then you also want to, and just in case you're wondering, these are a mixture of resin and plastic treasure chests here. So that I've got a bunch of masterpieces that I've made that are perfectly bubble free and not made out of plaster, so I don't have to worry about anything happening to them when they are in my storage over here. And so that's why they look like they're different colors and translucent. And so anyway, you get your box. You want to make sure that you have about 1/2 inch above your pieces, so make sure your mold is deep enough so that you can flex it and you won't end up tearing through your mold. Well, Legos are about 1/2 inch tall as well, and so you can tell by looking at your pieces. If you're just doing a treasure chest, for example, it's 1/2 inch tall, and so that you'll need to have another set of Legos above that in order to have a deep enough container. If you're using just a pre-made Tupperware, then it's just a matter of how much you pour over that. So you may want to measure up how far or how deep in the mold you want how far deep in the container you want to run the mold up, and take a Sharpie and mark that. So that's what I'll do. I make marks, inside the container. That I know how far to go up with the material. And then with the Legos, you can build up as far as you want. I've got a mold that I made from this just a couple of days ago, where I did 3 levels deep with Legos, and it was actually a little bit too much material. I wasted some of the material, but it's a very solid mold, and it doesn't have to flex that much, and so it works out pretty well. If you want something that flexes really well, then you want to make sure that you don't put a ton of extra space on top of it, because you'll get a really thick mold. So you've got your basic box, you've got super glue on the 4 corners to tack that down, you've glued in your pieces, you've determined how high you want your mold, and so now it's time to figure out how much silicone you need. Now in the last video we talked about several different types of silicone. Actually we just talked about the one type of silicone. We talked about the Umu series. And so this is the Umu 30 series. This is a 1-to-1 by volume, so part 1, or part A and part B, you will pour out the same amount, not by weight, by volume, and mix those two together. That's why that series is so easy to work with, because you don't even have to have a scale. You just basically pour as much as you need. You just determine how much you need, cut that in half, and then pour the same amount in 2 containers, and then you mix those two together. Now if you're using the Umu series, it is very important to make sure that you get that mixed properly. And so what what Smooth On advises you to do, this company that makes these different silicones, is the double pour method. And so you'll actually mix everything up in the cup. Pour the two in 2 separate cups, pour them together, stir, and then pour into the other cup. Stir that up, and then pour back into the original cup and stir that up, and that way you get a really good mixture. Now with the Umu, it is the blue is in a container is part B, I believe. Yeah, part B is blue, and then part A is very, very bright pink. And so when you mix the two together, it makes a purple mold. And so you've probably seen those on my previous videos. So this is a mold that was made with Umu 30. The problem with Umu 30 is that, I can show you, it wears and tears very, very quickly, and then also it's pretty difficult to get it all mixed correctly. So you can see there's a lot of blue in there, and that's because I did not get it mixed up correctly. And when you don't get it mixed up correctly, this happens. So you're able to just tear the mold right in half. I mean, I can show you how easy that is. So I'm just going to barely tear. I can just tear the thing all to pieces. Now, in fairness, see all the blue? And so I didn't get that mixed as well as I thought I did. It looked like I had it mixed really well, but it's so thick that you can't tell if you've really got it mixed properly unless you pour from cup to cup until you absolutely see no blue. You only see purple. But even when it's mixed well, I've got a couple that were mixed just perfectly, purple all the way through, and they're still already showing wear, and so these are very, very easy to tear up. It's too bad there's not some use for this for terrain, because I've got a bunch of chunks of it where I've just torn it up, and you can see here's a perfect example. So there's blue in the middle of that. So it's difficult to get it mixed up because it's really thick. The next step up from the Umu series, Umu is definitely a beginner silicone. It's not very hard. It's very easy to mix 1-to-1 by volume. You don't have to even have to have a scale. So very, very easy to use, and probably I would suggest starting out with it because it's very, very easy to make molds. Your molds won't have a long life. The next step up from that is the Mold Max 30. It is a 1-to-10 ratio, and so and you can get Mold Max 30, Mold Max 40. They all come in different colors. They're pink, the teal color, or green. There's another purple color. So depending on which variation you get, there'll be different color molds. Not that the color of the mold really matters, but they just come in varied colors for whatever reason. And then a new silicone that's just become available is this Mold Max 14 NV. So 14 NV, and it comes in the 1-to-10 ratio. So you get, instead of the 2 containers that are the same size, you get the silicone, which is in the large container, and then you get the hardener, which is in the small container. So part 1 or part A and part B again, but a 1-to-10 ratio. So different containers. And both of these are about the same price. These are what's considered a trial size. For hobbyists, that's all we need because we're making very small molds. But in the Hollywood effects industry and things like that, concrete industry, they order these things by the gallons. So 5-gallon buckets, 1-gallon buckets. So for these trial sizes of both products with shipping from Amazon or directly from Smooth On, it comes out to about $38. It's about $26 for the kit, and then about $12 shipping to, I think, anywhere in the 48 states. And so about 40 bucks for either one. So it's really, you need to decide what you'd like to do. If you want the easy mixture process with the Umu, then go for that. If you don't mind measuring things and you want your molds to last a lot longer and be a little bit more flexible and where they won't tear as the Umus do, then I would go with the 14 NV. The nice thing about the 14 NV is that it's very, very, very thin, so very low viscosity. And so you'll see when we go to mix it together, it's very thin as compared to the Umu. The Umu is almost a texture, or almost a consistency of like, I don't know, like a liquid bubble gum or something. It's just a very, very thick, sticky. It gets all over you when you're trying to mix it. If you're not careful, it's just really, really sticky, thick stuff. And then this is a very low viscosity, and so it actually, with the Umu, you'll want to paint. So once you've got the silicone mixed up, you'll want to paint it over your pieces if you have detailed pieces, just with a throwaway paintbrush or something, so that you get all those details, because it's so thick the bubbles will form around your pieces, even if you use a good mold release. So I prefer, and absolutely I think from here forward I'll probably use this Mold Max 14 NV. Same price. It's a little bit harder to mix up because it's 1-to-10 ratio, but 1-to-10 is pretty easy to figure out. And then the mold is so much better. No bubbles. And then even if you do get a little bit of deformation in your pieces, you can actually stretch the mold out and then use some like small clippers and fix things that are wrong in the mold if you happen to get some imperfections in the mold. So I really, really prefer this product. Alright, so once we figure out which silicone we're going to use, either way we've got to figure out the volume, so how much silicone we need. And so I am going to get my master mold for my treasure chest ready to go, and then I'll be right back and show you how to measure the volume. One of the other steps that I've actually found on YouTube that was really, really handy was using clay. So this is a plastiline clay. It never hardens, so you can leave it out, you can put it in a bag, whatever you want to do. You can use these pieces over and over and over. But I use this as just an extra reinforcement, because remember we're tacking those Legos down to the table. And you can use hot glue for this method, or you can use clay, whatever you'd like. I use just a very thin layer of clay for this. But basically you put this around the edge of the Legos because we did just tack them down. We didn't glue them down to the surface completely. And so there's a chance that some silicone could leak out, especially with this 14 NV. The Mold Max 14 NV is a low viscosity, and so it's very, very runny as compared to the others. And so I'll just take some clay and run around here, and you just push it into the corner. And again, it's just an extra precaution. You don't want to push it too hard because we do want to peel it back off when we're ready to demold. So I'll just push that around here, and again, you can use hot glue for this step. as well. I have found that the clay is much better at actually staying in place than the hot glue, but it's just personal preference, whatever you like to do. So put this clay all the way around. Kind of seal that in. Just make sure that no silicone escapes from our container. Alright, so now we are ready to see how much silicone we need. So the easiest way I've found, you can of course calculate this. I know I've seen some videos of Viv over at Rubbish In, Rubbish Out, where he'll just do raw calculations and figure this out, plus or minus a certain amount. I'm not comfortable doing that. I haven't done volume calculations in a long time, so the easiest way for me to do this is with rice or Rice Krispies. And so you actually take some Rice Krispies and just pour it into your mold. This is going to simulate the volume that you need. And so basically you want to fill this up to where it's level. So get that all in there. And it's okay if you have a little bit more. I mean, you're not going to waste that much silicone if it's off. And so we've got this in here at the level we need it. And so then we'll have another cup over here. And you're going to be as careful as you can. So once you've got this level, it's about how much silicone you need. Of course, minus the pieces that are in there. So it's a guesstimate, but it's close enough in my experience. And so we'll take this, and it makes a mess, no matter what you do. And so we'll dump that in there. It's actually much easier if you use rice instead of Rice Krispies, but sometimes I run out of the rice. And so gather these up. Alright, so what we're looking for from this is the volume of silicone that we need. So basically the amount of space that our silicone is going to take up. So once you have figured that out, I can see that, I don't know if you can see in that cup, I'll show you here. So you can see the level at which the Rice Krispies have lined up in here. And so I'm going to mark that level on the outside of the cup and on the inside of the cup as well. So I'm going to mark the level there. Let me go on the outside of the cup and mark it there as well. And so now I've got a good indicator on the inside. Can you see that? Yep. So you got a good indicator of how much we need there. And then you've also got an indicator on the outside of the cup of how much you need. So now that we've figured that out, the step we need to do next before we actually start mixing the silicone is to spray the mold release. Now you can use the mold release that we talked about last time. It's fine as long as you let it thoroughly dry. If you don't let it dry, then you'll run into problems in your mold. What I have done, I've tried several different mold releases over the last month or so since I did part 1, and by far the one that I like the best is the actual smooth-on universal mold release. You can grab this on Amazon. It's a little pricey. It's $15.95 for this can, $19.95 sometimes for the can, depending on which reseller you're getting it from. I think I got this one for $15.95 plus shipping, so a little pricey by the time you get it shipped. But every once in a while, for whatever reason, you can find it on Amazon where it's Prime eligible, where it's shipping from Amazon, and then you can get free shipping if you have a Prime account. And so I always try to find anything Prime that I can so I can get that free shipping. And so you want to make sure you spray this in a well-ventilated area. It's it's a chemical, and so it's not safe to inhale it. And so I've got a fan blowing over here, so I'm going to actually turn around and spray this. This is nice because it comes out in a very thin layer, and all you have to do is just let it set for about 5 minutes, and you're ready to go. And so I'm going to blow out any Rice Krispies that are left in here, any dust that's left in here, and then I'm going to spray the mold release really quickly. So just one even layer across everything, and then we'll start mixing our silicone. So I'll be right back. Alright, so we're going to let that set for about 5 minutes, and while we're doing that, while it's setting, we're going to go ahead and start mixing up our silicone. And it takes a little bit to mix it up. We'll measure it out, and so the 5 minutes will pass by before you even know it. So you don't even have to set a timer. And so we've got our scale. And I like to do this in grams. It's easier to calculate in grams, but you don't have to. You could do it in ounces if you just want to figure out the 1 to 10 mixture. So we want to dump out our Rice Krispies into our cup. We want to put our cup on, and we're going to tear the cup. So now we're at 0. And then we're going to start with the silicone. So this is part A. And so you want to make sure that you have shaken this up and stirred it really, really well. And I actually did not do that. So let me stir it up real quick, and then we'll start pouring. So be right back. Alright, so I've got everything stirred up. Now, I've got my cup marked, remember, with the volume, because we use the Rice Krispies to do that. And then, because I've got my mark that I'm going to pour to, I'm going to pour in the part A first, which is the silicone. Now you can see this is really, I don't know if you can see that on camera or not, but it's really runny. And so you always want to have something handy, like maybe a spoon or a dowel rod or something like that, whatever you're going to use to mix, to keep track of, or to keep it from running over onto your table. So we're going to pour the silicone in, up to our mark. That off. Paper towel. When you first start doing this, you might want to wear gloves as well, because this stuff tends to be runny until you get used to the characteristics of it. It's easy to get it on yourself, and so I've got gloves handy just in case I needed them. But I've done this several times, and so I'm pretty comfortable not using gloves. But if you want to, make sure you've got gloves. All right. So that's 152 grams, and so we know it's a 1 to 10 ratio, and so let's just say 152, so 1 to 10 ratio, that'd be 15 grams of the hardener. And this stuff, it says all over the bottle to shake very well, and so I've already shaken it one time. I'm going to shake it just one more time before we start putting that in. So we're going to go up to 152 plus 15 will be 167. So we're going to go up to 167 grams for our total volume. So we'll start pouring that in. This one is a mess to pour in. Because no matter what you do, it leaks. Alright, so 167. Wipe that off. And now we are ready to stir. So one of the most important parts of this is to stir. One of the things that I think I mentioned before that's a little bit different about this is that it is a white silicone with a clear hardener. And so unlike the Umu series and the Mold Max series, you don't have that color indication of when it's ready to go. You just have to go by looking at it and making sure that everything is very evenly mixed in here. So I'm going to speed up the video, and we're going to stir this up quite a bit. So we've got a 30-minute pot life, so no reason to hurry. We got plenty of time. So I'll stir this. Alright, so once we've got it mixed up, and I sped the video up, of course, but you don't want to mix you don't want to mix violently, so you want to mix just enough to mix it all together, but you don't want to introduce a ton of bubbles into this. It is self-degassing, and so you don't have to have a degassing chamber, and it does a really good job. As you're pouring it in, you can actually see all the bubbles popping as you go along, but just it's good not to introduce any additional bubbles while you're mixing it. So if this was the Umu, I would still be mixing for another 5 minutes or so. It's very, very, very thick. You can see how I'm very easily able to stir this. With the Umu, I would be really trying to stir it around. It's just very, very thick. So that's another thing I like about this 14NB. Alright, so I have got this ready to go. I'm going to clean off my stick. Just wipe that off real quick. Alright. So when you're pouring the silicone, you want to make sure that you pour into the corner of one of your molds. And of course, you want to check first to make sure. I almost forgot a step. You want to make sure that your space is level. I know that this space is level because I use it for making all my molds. Just make sure it's level, because if it's not level, then you could get some of your silicone could run out the end, and then more importantly, you wouldn't be able to scrape the bottom of your mold or the top of your mold whenever you're casting in it. You wouldn't be able to scrape the pieces level because the mold itself would be uneven. And so just double check to make sure that everything's level. Alright, so now we are ready to pour it in. We're going to pour from pretty high, about 6 or 8 inches high, and then we're going to pour into one of the corners very, very, very slowly, and just let it kind of move itself over the pieces. Again, if this was the umu, then we'd want to take a paintbrush and then paint over the treasure chest, and then this process. But with a 14 NV, you don't have to do that. And so I'm going to go ahead and start pouring this. So from a pretty high point and into one of the corners. Just let it fill the mold, let it fill the container itself. If you see it about to overflow on one side, if you're pouring too fast, you can slow down a little bit, or you can move out from the edge a little bit once you've got that corner built up. And I'm sure you're not going to be able to see this on the camera, but there's bubbles popping all over the top of the surface. It's really, really good at self-degassing. Alright. So I'm going to use my container, or my stirring stick. Just get the extra little bit out of there. Just use all of it that I can. Alright, so that's all of it. Set that aside and I'll clean that up. And then we're going to let this set. The demold time, the pot life again is 30 minutes. So you've got 30 minutes to work with getting everything in place. The bubbles, you can see the bubbles popping right across the top there. I hope you can see that on camera. And so it will self-degas, it will self-level. As long as your space is level, then it will self-level, of course. And then in about 4 hours, it says on the container 4 hours to demold. I usually let it set for about 5 or 6 hours just to be safe. So I'm going to let that set, and then we'll come back in about 4 or 5 hours and check on it, and I'll show you what the demolding process looks like. Alright, so it's been a little over 5 hours since we poured the mold, so now it's time to demold it. It helps to have some little tool, like a little butter knife or something like that, to help start getting the clay off. Just kind of help push around the corner. And then we'll peel all the clay off. It comes off pretty easily. All the way around here. And then just start popping these Legos off. You want to get that. For my mold, you know, like I said, the first level I've got super glued down, but for yours you can actually just pop off both levels. But my bottom level is actually super glued on permanently. So I'm going to leave that first level, and we're going to pull off the whole top level. And once you've got one Lego off, then they come off pretty easily all the way around. And you will get a little bit of silicone in between each of the Legos, but that's perfectly fine. You can see these little you can see that or not, but these little tendrils of silicone there that are between each one of those, but those just pull and snap off. So, alright. Okay, so pull some of that excess silicone. And then we'll start to pull on this, and you just gently pull because you don't want to tear, especially if you're using the umu. Then you just want to be careful when you're demolding because you don't want to tear the mold. And just gently start pulling on each one of the corners to start getting it loose, and you'll feel it start breaking loose. And once you've got it breaking loose in there, and like I said, if I was taking off this bottom layer of Legos, this would be much easier to get off because you're not trying to peel it off of those Legos at the same time as you're peeling it off of the actual piece. So I'll pull that out of there. And just slowly, just take your time and pull it off of each piece. You don't want to rush it. And just slowly pull it off. So you can see that coming up like that. Work it around. And there you go. So there's my master, and there's my mold. Really, really stretchy. Very, very, very durable. Like I said, you can go around and pull these just extra pieces off the sides with your hands. One of the things that I like to do with my molds, once I've got them, once I've got it demolded and have all this extra stuff pulled off, then I'll go around and I'll just trim. You'll notice on Bruce's molds there's almost like a 45-degree trim all the way around. That's because if you start casting this thing and it gets a little bit wet and it's on a slick surface, then it'll actually form a vacuum. It'll stick to the surface. And so if you're trying to manipulate it around when you are casting, then it prevents you from doing that. But if you cut at a 45 around here, just trim off basically that square edge, then that will keep it from forming a vacuum or sealing against your surface. Now, one thing that you'll notice and see a little bit here, if you look at the mold, you can see there's like little rough parts here and there, and then maybe like here, right there's a corner that's still in there because the silicone slightly went under the model. In most cases, you can just pull that and just take it out. But if you can't, then you can take a little small pair of scissors and just cut that into the corner where it's supposed to be. It doesn't actually hurt anything. The silicone would or the plaster would actually go in there and form the chest correctly, but it makes it easier to demold your castings whenever all that's cleaned up. So just go around and clean up your corners, and there's your mold. So very, very durable. And like I said, the Umu 30, I mean, you saw me earlier pull on that and just bust it right in half, and you can't do that with this 14 NV, and it actually cures faster than the Umu. So my personal preference, the Mold Max 14 NV for sure. Alright, so if you guys have any questions about the mold making process, if you have any comments, if you want to share your own experiences, then drop those in the comments below. Of course, remember to like the video and then subscribe so if you want to see future videos from our channel. And then of course check out our Etsy channel. The link's down below in the About section, and that is cicadacrafts.com. Alright, until next time, see you guys.